What if the most explosive question surrounding this marriage is no longer whether Meghan wants more, but whether Harry was only ever one step on a much bigger ladder? Because suddenly, the whispers are not about ordinary Hollywood networking, glamorous parties, or celebrity friendships. They are about reported meetings with billionaires in Los Angeles. Meetings, not premieres, not cocktails, not accidental encounters beneath flashing cameras. Meetings, and that single word changes the temperature of this entire story.
Been to undermine the very people who gave this third-rate actress credibility and status, and that I think is unforgivable.
Elon's not interested, and Gordon Getty's been blocked by his family, so poor darling, and Jeff's taken by Lauren. So I mean, the poor girl, what are her options?
She's what I would call a ruthless social climber, who just when people are no longer, no longer appropriate parts of her circle, they have to be expunged quickly so she can move on up the ladder.
Listen to the source revealing she wants 4 floors of the Hyatt Hotel, completely shut down just for her. Extra security outside. Staff aren't allowed to look at her. She's in total control.
Meghan is driving Harry to his absolute destruction. And this is something that his family has feared for a very long time.
The claim exploded on live television, where a royal show presenter said he knew of meetings involving billionaires in Los Angeles, and the wording immediately sounded far more calculated than casual socializing. Then came something even more uncomfortable. Sitting beside him was the woman who wrote Harry's biography, someone who had spent 2 years around the man and still reportedly liked him, yet she did not challenge what had just been said. Instead, the explanation offered on the program pushed the speculation into darker territory. Meghan reportedly remains because the right replacement has not appeared yet. Think about the implication. The argument being floated was not that a marriage had simply become unhappy. It was that something or someone better would have to appear first.
I know for a fact that there have been meetings with billionaires in Los Angeles.
These really successful men out here who Meghan Markle would love to glom onto, and she would ditch Harry for in a second.
And then another voice entered the picture. Diana's former butler had already discussed essentially the same theory on television after spending 10 years serving Diana and witnessing royal life away from public view. His argument? Millions supposedly would never satisfy the ambition being described. A billionaire, according to that theory, would represent the next rung. And money was not the only possibility being discussed. Politics entered the conversation too. California, elected office, influence, and the kind of leverage that cannot be bought merely by holding a fading royal connection.
Meghan has very good friends for as long as she needs them, and often leaves them behind when she thinks she's got what she wanted from them.
These really successful men out here who Meghan Markle would love to glom onto, and she would ditch Harry for in a second.
Then a royal correspondent on the same program sharpened the controversy by saying Meghan is always thinking about what comes next before discussing reported friendships with extremely wealthy men that might come in handy. That phrase is brutal because critics immediately interpreted it transactionally. Come in handy for what? Business? Influence? Access? A future completely separate from the marriage? None of that establishes motive, but once commentators began putting those pieces beside one another, the picture they were constructing became impossible to ignore.
Being royal wasn't grand enough for her, and she wasn't going to make enough money out of it as quickly as she intended.
And that brings everything crashing into 2026, because critics are asking what exactly she is married to now. On a podcast, Harry was reportedly asked what he actually does for a living and seemingly struggled to produce a straightforward answer. Duke, Prince, and then uncertainty. Reports have also contrasted a roughly 50,000 property conference appearance with the enormous sums once associated with his speaking potential. That contrast feeds the harshest theory in this entire saga. Royal status may remain priceless symbolically while becoming increasingly difficult to convert into the level of commercial power once imagined.
She will dump him when he is no longer much use. But she'd have to have an escape route. She'd have to find sort of a Silicon Valley or somehow aging billionaire.
One group of commentators argues that Britain is effectively closed. Not the king, not the Wills household, not now. Ingrid Seward, after 4 decades editing a magazine covering these people, once reduced his usefulness to one devastating word: entree. In that interpretation, he represented the doorway. He was access. And critics now argue that the doorway has already been walked through.
He's bored in California, rattling around that mansion, no job, the charities are a hot mess, a public relations dumpster fire, a smoking ruin, reputationally, for Harry.
But to understand why these billionaire whispers have become so combustible, the story has to rewind, because even the beginning remains contested. Critics allege she had been traveling into London from 2013 onward while specifically seeking an Englishman. One television panel even placed footballer Ashley Cole in that earlier orbit. Then came September 2015. At roughly 1:00 in the morning, an unsolicited message reportedly arrived in Piers Morgan's inbox. What followed would later become one of the strangest pieces of this timeline: a solo dinner, followed by complete silence.
Harry says that he wants reconciliation with his family, but then he contradicts himself and says he knows that he's upset some of them, or most of them. And how can he get reconciliation when he keeps giving interviews? None of them trust him.
The account became famous because Piers Morgan said Meghan Markle ghosted him. He described liking her and then publicly characterized her as a slight social climber. But the next allegation makes the sequence even more provocative. Before any first date existed, Tom Bower reported that she had told her agent she had Googled Harry and researched his life extensively. Bower said the information came from the agent. If accurate, critics argue this was not simply romance arriving unexpectedly. They interpret it as preparation. And that is precisely where the mystery becomes dangerous. Because if the beginning was calculated, as critics claim, then every reported billionaire meeting appearing years later suddenly acquires a completely different meaning. The question is no longer merely who is in the room. The question becomes why they are there, what happens next, and whether Harry is beginning to discover that the latter critics accuse Meghan of climbing may have another rung above him. And that alleged research is where critics say the disappointment began, because the fantasy supposedly collided with the financial reality waiting behind the palace gates. The claim is that she expected staggering wealth, but instead discovered a man living at Frogmore Cottage with an inheritance, a second-hand sofa, and none of the independent financial machinery critics imagined would follow a prince everywhere. Inside royal life, that status was priceless. Outside it, particularly once America became the destination, commentators questioned what commercial engine actually existed. One critic brutally asked what a man who had never generated a dollar for himself could possibly know about negotiating deals and building serious wealth. Then Lady Colin Campbell, after decades circling this family, dropped the question hanging over everything: would Meghan have been interested in Harry if Harry had not been Prince Harry? Nobody rushed to answer. And in the eyes of critics, that silence became louder than any response. The argument then became even harsher. According to the commentary, no matter how wealthy Harry actually was, she was allegedly going to use the relationship to pursue ambitions critics believed existed long before the marriage, especially after supposedly realizing he was nowhere near as rich as expected. From there, attention shifted toward reported behavior from the acting years, where an unnamed director allegedly described demands exceeding those of genuine A-listers, including claims involving a private jet from a small production. The comparison was merciless. She thought she was beyond. Another source described alleged demands for 4 floors of the Hyatt Hotel to be completely shut down, additional security positioned outside, and staff supposedly instructed not to look at her. Whether every allegation proves a larger pattern is another question entirely, but critics seized upon the same theme again and again: control, access, and expectations. Then came May 2018, Windsor, with 600 people inside that chapel and practically the entire planet watching outside. Yet critics were not merely watching the ceremony, they were studying the pews. Bower highlighted the absence of some of Harry's own friends, while major Hollywood figures appeared among the guests: Oprah, the Clooneys, and even a row of her agents. Agents inside a royal wedding chapel. Critics treated that detail like dynamite because the accusation was that Meghan never truly intended to settle permanently into the traditional existence existence of a dutiful duchess opening hospitals in Shropshire. Instead, the theory presented was that Hollywood had always remained the destination, and that the title would eventually become part of a renewed career. And Tina Brown saw something even more revealing in that guest list. Her interpretation was that these were not necessarily the friends Meghan already possessed, they represented the friendships she wanted. Suddenly, the wedding in that reading looked less like the end of a romantic journey and more like the beginning of an extraordinary networking opportunity. The celebrity buffet had arrived, and critics argued she wanted everything available from it. Andrew Martin reduced the alleged pattern to a devastating description: a networker to her fingertips. Then the timeline started stacking up 2004 and a Los Angeles producer with an address book, 2012, and Marcus Anderson, the Soho House gatekeeper through that connection, Jessica Mulroney. Then Dublin by 2014. Critics described a ruthless social climber whose circle allegedly changed whenever somebody no longer fitted the direction of travel. And this is where the theory becomes uncomfortable, because if people truly disappeared once their usefulness ended, there should theoretically be a trail. Reports claim there was one, Mulroney reportedly cut off without explanation. Nanaki Pretty, close since childhood, describing someone capable of becoming cold, then Kundi McIntosh, Nelthorpe Cown, Nick Eade, Morgan, a decades-long sequence critics insist cannot simply be ignored. Yet even the source acknowledges the crucial complication: nobody has proved one unified motive connecting every broken relationship. Individual friendships collapse for ordinary reasons, but the unanswered question remains, and it is the question now haunting every billionaire rumor surrounding this marriage. When one rung stops taking you higher, what happens when another one finally appears?